the Luke Skywalker X-wing pilot from the Star Wars action figures collection, each sold separately.
I'm Jabba. Want to buy a droid? Show me what you got.
It's Arfive-Defour and the Power Droid.
Sold.
And here's Greedo, Han Solo, and Walrus Man.
You've had it now, Solo. Yeah. Greedo, it's Ben Kenobi and his lightsaber. We're in trouble. Let's get out of here.
Luke Skywalker X-wing pilot, R5-D4, Greedo, and other action figures sold separately from Kenner.
Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and joining me I have James. Say hi, James.
Hello, hello.
Well, we are returning once again to one of our favorite topics and continuing on an episode we started a couple of episodes back. We did Attack of the 12 Backs, and this is all about vintage Kenner Star Wars action figures and how these waves were introduced to the public and to us, obviously, you know, in stages, in waves. And the name 12-back, which was the last episode, refers to the actual back of the card. It's weird. I don't even know if they use that term anymore, but nowadays, but what happened is, you know, once we got to the second wave, they're kind of referred to these days as the 20/21 backs because of the fact that it depends on how you count them, and we'll go over that and we'll explain it to you. So last time we also let you guys know some of the sources we were using. You know, I got a whole bunch of, you know, the old Steven Sansweet books here, which they give you great information on all the different variants and carding and all this stuff like that. I also have here, which is really cool, one of the latest books that came out, which I mentioned last time, called The Ultimate Guide to Vintage Star Wars Action Figures, 77 to 85 by Mark Belomo.
Are you getting paid for this commercial?
I wish I was. But again, this is for you guys. If you like to have reference material, those are great examples. The granddaddy of all reference materials, I'll mention it again because this is something I don't even own. I wish I owned it, but it's super expensive, is the Kellerman book, which is considered to be the Bible of Star Wars vintage action figures in terms of how insanely detailed this book is. It goes on eBay for anywhere from $3,000 to $1,000, depending on how insane people are. And if you're a diehard variant collector, serious collector, you know, that's the book to have. And I don't know, maybe one day I'll run into it at some yard sale or something. But anyway, last time we talked about the 12 backs, the first initial wave.
When last our heroes were...
I know. Now, we're going to hit these figures in no particular order in terms of which came first, which came second. These are all part of that second wave. So let's start off with Greedo. Now, the first thing we have to mention, and this is something that applies to a lot of these cantina creatures, is that from what I'm told and from what I've read, Kenner did not have access to too many pictures of all of these creatures.
They basically had headshots.
Right, yeah, they have heads and maybe a little bit of a chest shot, of like a bust shot.
But it was in black and white and vague.
A lot of times they were in black and white. I mean, obviously, when they carded the figure, you got to see them in color and everything. And sometimes it might have been after the fact that they get their hands on the color stuff. But this is where we notice one of the biggest changes. Not so much with the 12 backs. The 12 backs, if you think about it, they're pretty dead on, except for some of the coloring. But clothing wise, they're pretty dead on. Costumes are costumes. With Greedo, off the bat, one of the things that makes him a little different is that the head looks pretty damn good. You know, it looks pretty good to what we are used to seeing in the movie.
Sure. But
the body, James, tell us a little about the body and how it's different than what we saw in the movie.
In the movie, Greedo is turquoise-ish in a spacesuit, turquoise spacesuit, and an orange, kind of like a puffy vest type of thing.
Yeah,
and it's a nice outfit for a guy who is hanging out in different climates, let's say. However, the figure comes across and he's all green, and it looks like a spacesuit-ish kind of character, but it's more greenish, and it's not quite. So as we figured along the lines, they had a picture of the head. They might have even had a color picture of the head from the set, but they didn't quite have any, body shots. And
right. It's also a little difficult to tell. I'm not sure because, I'm looking at my figure here. Greedo also has these little suction cuppy type of fingertips.
Yeah, well, that didn't translate into the figure.
Yeah, that would be way too much detail.
And it would be hard to get the gun to stay in his hand.
Yeah, now speaking of the gun, this is a figure where they basically recycled the Han Solo blaster, which is that specific type of blaster, and that was included with this figure. So again, the head, excellent job. The body, a little different, very, very spacey, very generic spaceman kind of body.
Did it keep you from shooting him as Han Solo when you played as a kid?
Are you kidding me? We don't.
I'm not playing. This is
if it
terrible.
had the label
I won't
Star
play
Wars,
with him.
we were jumping on it the second we saw it. I mean, it's a great looking figure, and it's still, you can still find it, even in the second hand market. You can find it in pretty good shape a lot of times. Obviously, when they remade them, they went completely crazy in terms of the proper vest, the proper pants, the proper this, the proper that. But, not bad for a first try, I guess. And as you mentioned, they did kind of retool a little bit. They got a little more detail this second time around when it came to the second wave of figures. The only variant I'm aware of, and it's not that big of a deal, is that in future Greedos, I believe, or the Tri-Logo Greedo, his color is a little more like you mentioned. It kind of goes into the blues a little more than so much green. The majority of the ones that are out there that we're familiar with are green as green can get.
Yeah.
But there is a very slight color variation. Again, this is for the diehard variant collectors. Up next, Hammerhead.
I like him. I dug him.
Yeah.
He's got more like a leotard on, not quite a leotard, a singlet. Like it covered a one-piece bathing suit. Let's say it covered his most intimate of areas.
He's like a gymnast or something.
Yeah, his arms and legs are totally exposed, and I kind of like that in my action figure alien.
Well, once again, if we compare him to the movie, I don't remember seeing anything blue on him. He kind of wore, from what I remember, and even by looking at the card, the actual Kenner card.
Was it more orange or brownish?
It was brownish. It kind of matched his skin a little bit. So it's like, okay,
well, then he would have looked
blue.
nude.
But what's cool about, one of the best things about Hammerhead is the fact that even though they had to kind of make up the rest of the body, it is excellent. The legs, the skinny legs with the big gigantic tri-toe feet and everything, very kind of, I don't want to say muscular, but very bony, very like... They did an excellent job with Hammerhead. And again, it's the same problem. They don't have the picture, so they don't know what to do. The blaster they decided to place on Hammerhead,
it's a Stormtrooper one, right?
It's a generic Stormtrooper blaster, even though in the movie we never really see him, shoot anybody or anything like that.
He's an action figure. He has to have a weapon so he can get into some action.
And he has possibly one of the best grips for a gun in all of the lines, because it's he can handle that gun and it feels like it's not going to fall off on him or anything like that.
Nice, firm, but yet supple grip.
The only other thing I believe about Hammerhead is the variant in terms of variations. I think the only thing people sometimes look for is which way the eyes are pointing. Apparently, some of them point to the left and some of them point slightly down or maybe a little bit up or something like that. So that's the only differences. I have never noticed that.
I've had these figures since the day they've come out practically. And this is stuff that I've never really ever thought about. And I have a full collection. I just don't. I love that people are so involved that they could find these different things. I just never even thought of that.
I know. I learn these things when I buy these books. I'm like, oh, really? I mean, sometimes I know it, and sometimes it completely catches me by surprise. Another thing I want to mention that we didn't mention with Greedo is that at this point, it's still 1978, so the price point, it's still $199. It's that sweet $199 that we're never going to see ever again.
Well,
these days.
We did the math, and $10 is the modern day equivalent of $199. So I guess inflation and time and interest.
All right, up next, we have Walrus Man, which sometime in the future they started referring to him as Ponda Baba, but we knew him as Walrus Man. Now, let's keep in mind also, Greedo is Greedo because his name is in the movie. Yeah. But a lot of these characters,
Hammerhead was like Mamu Namu or something like that, or... Right? What's Hammerhead's real name?
Mao Nadon or something like that.
Mamu Nadon. Yeah, okay. See, that's why his name is Hammerhead. It's a lot simpler for a kid.
But I'm pretty sure in the beginning they didn't even have those names. From what I heard, they just
were
referred
considered racial slurs to the
No. I think they never had...
Hey, look, here comes a Walrus Man. Hey, I'm not Walrus Man. I got a name.
I think they were purposely non-named characters.
Simple. It was simple.
And they called them by whatever the heck they looked like at the time.
And I'll guarantee you that's what they called him in the Monster Shop. And then somebody retroed his name because of a fan site or,
Well, I remember seeing some sketches. I don't necessarily think they were Ralph McQuarrie. They might have been Ralph McQuarrie, but there might have been some other artists at the time that they were just sketching random type of creatures. And they would just say, this is kind of like a Hammerhead looking thing. And then the name kind of sticks during the production. And sometimes they even credit Kenner for saying, that's the name we're going to give it.
Because a lot of these guys had names, some of which we can't even repeat, because they were just codes for the dude's creating them in the shop and saying,
Oh,
all right,
yeah.
So.
Now, the thing about Walrus Man, the unusual thing, this is something I never really noticed. And it's stupid because, we've seen the movie. I've seen the movie. In the movie, the character of Walrus Man is this weird creature that is speaking some weird language that Luke doesn't understand. And he has this face and these hairs sticking out. And I never really made the connection that the figure, again, no disrespect to anybody listening to this or anybody, looks like a butt. Looks like the guy has a butt in his face. And because of the color
we don't want
variation,
to offend anybody who have butts on their face.
I know, we don't want to offend the butt face people, but depending on the color variation, apparently some of them are slightly pinkish and some of them are slightly a little more greenish tint. But I never made the connection that those are supposed to be these huge tusks.
Those are his choppers.
It's supposed to look like a walrus. And in the movie, you could actually see some hairs, more looking even
like
more like a real
walrus. Yeah.
Right. The other thing that's bizarre about the figure, again, no pictures. You don't have references except for the face, so they're always running into the same problem.
But this is funny because he did have a head and shoulder shot because he's standing next to Luke, and so a little effort might have gotten them a black and white still that looked closer to what he looked like on film.
Again, in the picture in the packaging, he is wearing a slightly orange type of top,
all right.
And it has these big pockets. You could see these big pockets, which they never bothered putting on, which is
and
all
they
right.
They were doing this quickly, and they had to move them, and they had a deadline, and so I'm not upset.
What's weird about this character is that in the movie, there's a blooper, if you will, or a continuity error, and that is with his hands. At one point, we are told, or we see some pictures of him having these kind of like a cupped, kind of like gigantic, big half circle hands.
Yeah.
And then when Ben chops off his arm
it
on
looks
the
like
floor,
a regular paw.
It looks like a furry type of, it's supposed to be like a fin type of arm. So that's something that was a problem with the movie, but with the figure, they decided to skip the cup and go for the normal hand. It almost looks like a flipper kind of hand looking thing. Again, the blue and the orange, it kind of sticks out way, way more than I think it was in the movie. But again, this is one of those characters that they had to go with what they had. We have another Stormtrooper blaster with him, give him a generic gun. I don't even remember if I don't think that's what he had in the movie.
No, his gun
looked
different. His gun had it
was more like a pistol?
Yeah, it was a completely different weapon that no other creatures had. Like, it wasn't a Stormtrooper or blaster type thing. It was just a different shape.
Right. And like I mentioned before, the only variance I'm aware of is the shading of the actual tusks. All right, we are now moving to a pair of, I don't want to say controversial, but kind of weird related
special
characters. And let's start off with what we would consider to be the regular Snaggletooth.
And he's the red one, shorter.
He's the little shorty red guy.
He was the one that was carded. He was the one you could get on the card in the store. And I guess you see him, and he does look small in the film.
He is in the background. He's sitting there. He pops up every now and then, but I don't think he's ever wearing that red costume. I think he's wearing something different. His mask is used, and as a matter of fact, I know that I have this picture, and I'll try to post it if I remember, of all the different actors in their costumes, and you can tell that a lot of times they reuse the masks in different outfits. So there is
especially in the shots that were shot in England had a lesser amount of creatures and some reused masks. So there'd be like 2 or 3 of a certain guy potentially. When they reshot certain scenes in California, then that's when we got some more exotic, interesting masks.
Exactly. Now, the costume, what's unusual about the costume, and the story goes, again, this is all part of this myth or legend or who the hell knows, that the designer, the person who actually sculpted the figure, who was a Kenner employee, decided to use the logo of either his department or his company or something having to do with him, and it looks like a little eagle. It's like a white little eagle, and they placed that he used it as a belt buckle. Again, you've never seen this before. It's not in the movie. You're not going to find it. They gave him a blaster, again, the Han Solo type. No problem. You never see him using it, but it's a cool little figure. Now, what's interesting about this figure is when you now get to the secondary one. Now, tell us about, James, about how you acquired that secondary one and what it's called.
The blue legendary Snaggletooth was available only through Sears Wish Book in 1978. Now, the Sears Wish Book, it's pretty well known to anybody, say, 30 and older. And that would be some magical book that came at around the fall time, sometime September, October. and had all kinds of glorious toys and things that you could order starting specifically around the holiday time. And it's something that doesn't exist anymore, and unfortunately, Sears doesn't almost exist anymore. But
yeah, no kidding.
This was a special type of thing that you would get some kind of exclusive. And it wasn't only Star Wars, but for our purposes, Star Wars was the most important. And this was their first exclusive, and it was the Creature Cantina set.
Yep.
Now, this set came very similar to the Early Bird set. You got a cardboard stand-up background that you could put the little pegs in, as we've discussed in the past, that fit into the feet. But you also, in this case, you got the 4 figures right at the same time after you ordered it. Now, it was eventually available in some stores, but the original way to get it, the first way to get it, was to order it through the Wish Book, pick it up at your Sears store, or have it delivered to your home, depending on which way you chose to get your delivery, and the glorious 4 figures. However, in this set, blue, tall Snaggletooth, it's really a mistake because Snaggletooth was never expected to be that tall and blue, apparently.
It almost looks as if you take a closer look at the figure, it looks like they used the same head, the same chest, the same arms, but I have no clue where they found these legs.
Yeah, well, I liked him, and I thought he was blue, and I thought it was cool, and he had some really groovy boots that were a combination. They were a combination of Barbarella and Studio 54. So I never really considered him a problem, but by the time he came carded, he was the smaller red-suited guy with actual paws for feet rather than the disco boots.
Got it. One thing to point out, and again, I don't know if this is true or not. I've never really looked at it that close, but one of these books mentions also that if you watch the holiday special, the infamous holiday special, which, if you guys remember, they recycled a lot of masks from Star Wars in order to recreate a cantina scene. All of a sudden, you'll notice that the Snaggletooth mask character is wearing a completely red and black outfit
to match
the action figure, not the movie. Not only that, but some people even claim that he's actually wearing the belt. They recreated the belt in real life.
The red Snaggletooth might actually be the first EU figure, and here's why I say that. Assuming the holiday special was EU, even though it's been disavowed in many circles, it was prominently seen in there, making him based on the holiday special, not the actual movie. The holiday special came out in November of 78. So maybe.
Well, you could also say, I mean, again, I'm not entirely sure about this, but this is something that's a great thing to look into. If you look at the card for Snaggletooth, he is, first of all, the Snaggletooth action figure, his skin is kind of gray. It's like a gray skin creature. If you look at the picture in the card, he's kind of brown with hair.
I mean, I think it's all minutia. And again, I know people really care about this, and I just never did. I was happy with the tall one. So the small one came, and it's just another excuse to buy another figure. So thank goodness. I'll buy as many as you have. But I just don't think it matters what color it is.
When did the holiday special come out?
November 78.
Okay. What's interesting also about this carded figure, the carded red Snaggletooth, is that the picture shows him wearing the red and black outfit. And I think it's still questionable whether or not this red and black outfit ever appeared in Star Wars. Or again, could they have been using a picture from the holiday special?
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. I'm saying he's an EU figure. He's an uncelebrated EU figure because the holiday special Cantina with Beatrice Arthur was the EU. So he's magical in his own way.
I know. This is definitely something I want to look a little more deep into it because I want to solve this mystery. As far as variations go for Snaggletooth, the small red one I don't think has many variations, but the large, the Sears one, the blue one, apparently the biggest variation that's out there, and this is because nowadays it is a super expensive figure. If you want this figure, you're going to spend at least $100 or $150 for it.
Wow, really?
Because that's how much this loose figure is worth these days. If it's in a little baggie, forget it. It's worth even more. Or if it's in an unopened cantina set, forget it. But the only variation I'm aware of is this slight indentation on one of the toes that makes it either worth a little more or worth a little less. Not ridiculous, but it's something that variant collectors, kind of keep an eye out for in case, they see that sort of thing.
Now, are people making homages to this so you can get it a little cheaper, thus ruining the market?
Well, if you go down the reproduction or the repro side, they are not just the Blue Snaggletooth, but there are other, the super hard to find figures, the yak faces and the Vlicks.
Well, this
if you go down the droids.
Are there
this one,
repros?
This one they make repros that are either. Some people actually take apart a regular Snaggletooth and snap on some new legs and repaint them, and then you have your own homemade Blue Snaggletooth.
Yeah.
And some people are actually casting the entire figure in plastic without articulation, painting it, and there you have it.
For display purposes.
For display
nobody
purposes.
Ever touches it, they don't know it doesn't
that's
move.
the type that I have. I own one of those recast ones because for my purposes, I know I'm never going to own some of these super expensive ones, so I don't mind having, like a stand-in, if you will.
You're ruining the market. I hope you're proud of yourself.
Oh, be quiet. Up next, we are done with creatures, and now we are going to hit a couple droids. So we have Arfive-Defour.
I would call this another wave because even though the Cantina guys eventually came carded with this group, this felt to me like it was a different wave. It was an early 79 wave.
Well, technically, like I said before, they did come out in 78 officially, maybe as far as paper goes, but when you find it in the stores, you might not have seen it until a little into 79. You never know.
Yeah.
The way that the Arfive-Defour figure is built is basically the same as the R2-D2 figure, except that they changed the head. Why don't you tell us a little about the variation and how the head is different?
Well, his artwork is essentially R2 but red, and his head is just turning does the same clicks and chirps like R2,
clicks, yeah.
But it has the reddish and the more angular look. It's not quite screen accurate, but who knew? Nobody. Did you care?
No, I mean, it's as screen accurate as R2-D2 is.
It's a little shorter. It's the same size as R2, and it's a little shorter. It seems to me, through any promotional and watching on the film, that the real R5-D4 was a little taller than R2, and this figure comes across about the same size as R2. So that would be the only inaccuracy. But I loved him because it was so cool to have a different droid to interact with R2 and 3PO.
That's the main thing, especially when you're playing with your figures, when you're trying to put figures inside other ships and stuff like that. Granted, you couldn't do it on the X-wing, but you could do it on the Y-wing, where you can actually place an astromech inside.
And if you had the Sandcrawler, the radio-controlled Sandcrawler, or even the Land of the Jawas cardboard play set, it's nice to have another iconic member of that scene. You don't have an Uncle Owen, but you have the Jawas, you have the droids, you have Luke, and so you could kind of play along and have a little more fun.
What's amazing is that they didn't make more astromechs. And nowadays, I mean, with Hasbro, and I mean, they've made so many nowadays. It's ridiculous. The color variations and the different designations, the ones with the clear domes and the slightly circular dome and this dome and that dome. Back then, it would have been so easy if you think about it, because there is no detail in the body. The body's a sticker. They could manufacture any old stupid sticker they wanted. The color of the droid is whatever you use for plastic. So if they're using white, hell, you can use black, and there all of a sudden now you have Imperial droids. You can have all kinds of colors.
I think they could have done that, but I don't think their marketing plan was like that, unlike the more recent years when they would make whole droid sets, droid factory sets, astromech sets and stuff. I think back then they tried to keep it either to identifiable characters who had somewhat identifiable names or key scenes or even, part of a group. Like we said, we didn't even get a Tarkin, but we have some other a little bit more obscure figures. But as the series grew, then they took more chances. But this was still the early days, even though this is the second wave, so to speak, it's still they're just getting up on. They're still just trying to make this work.
Right, and similar to R2, this droid does not have the third leg that they're supposed to have and available. I guess we don't see a third leg. In a way, we kind of see a third leg when they do the droid factory.
Yeah.
But that's a third leg you cannot attach into a regular figure. You could only attach it to the droid that came with the droid factory.
Which is slightly smaller than the real R2.
Yeah, I have a feeling, I'm not entirely sure, but I have a feeling you could modify that third leg so it would fit into one of these guys. Yeah. But I guess people didn't want to mess around with it too much. Up next, we have another weird, slightly controversial figure, what's called the Death Star droid.
Yeah. And he's kind of a hybrid. If I'm right, he's a bit of a hybrid of two droids. He's similar to the Death Star droid, which was black, but he's also reminiscent of a droid that was inside the Sandcrawler, with R2 and 3PO, who was silverish. So even though he's called the Death Star droid, that particular one that we got is really based on the Sandcrawler droid.
To me, if you look at the picture that they use in the card, it is exactly the one in the Jawa Sandcrawler.
Yeah.
Now, what's funny is that the only Death Star droid, like you mentioned before, that I remember seeing in Star Wars is the black one that's walking by the elevators while, I think Luke is...
So really, we could have gotten two, and I'm sure a lot of customizers have done the right thing.
And I have that. I've done that. I've actually purchased one, which is the same exact droid, but they repainted it black. They reversed the colors, basically.
Yeah.
And it looks exactly like that one.
Nice.
Now, what's interesting about this droid is that if you look it up in Wikipedia, I think it is, they figured out a way of kind of getting around that inconsistency. And that is, they made up a story, I guess based on the EU, that the Death Star droid, it's called Death Star droid because the Empire gives people, and even the Empire itself, the Death Star itself and the Star Destroyers themselves, it gives out droids and to help them work and to kind of sway people into being friendly to the Empire. But little do people know, including a lot of Imperials, that the Death Star droid is really recording their conversations.
Yeah.
It's more of a spy type of droid.
Sure.
So they say that a lot of people, they accept the GIF, but then they disable the recording mechanism or they just get rid of the droids. And that is how a so-called Death Star droid wound up
Tatooine?
in a Sandcrawler. It was a discarded droid nobody wanted, but there it is. So,
isn't it possible also, here's my little aside since you're saying that he accompanied the Empire down to Tatooine looking for R2 and 3PO, and because of the temperature and the sand, got disabled or left behind. Jawa scavenged them up, and he wound up in there with those guys. I don't know.
I imagine anything the Jawas have in there.
There's a comic book right there.
Yeah, anything the Jawas find, they throw it in their Sandcrawler and they resell it, and most of it is junk.
And, hey, maybe that's even how the Empire found the Sandcrawler, because he was in there alerting them with like a GPS.
That's possible too.
Right.
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Let me hit another droid before we get to the last two. What we like to call the Gonk droid was sold as the Power Droid. Now tell us a little about the Power Droid.
Well, this guy is not quite screen accurate, but he is so cool and one of everybody's favorites growing up because he had the little legs underneath that could swing back and forth with the little clicks.
With the clicking sound, yeah.
But he was different looking. And, when you're buying figures, you tend to think of figures as, hands, legs, head, torso. This guy, other than R2, was one of the first guys that was so different, and he's packaged so cool, and he's got the little purple looking or like fuchsia looking
he's got no personality whatsoever.
Name label, and he's just in his little bubble and happy as pie. And I like him because they are kind of like the astromech droids. They're the workhorses of the galaxy, and so you see him at the Sandcrawler, you see him around the Moisture Farm. Eventually, you see them walking around Hoth and, around the hangar. So these guys are, really hard-working, good droids. You eventually see one getting tortured. Oh,
yes.
My goodness. He's crying
That's
out.
right.
He's getting hurt so bad.
That's right. They're basically walking batteries, and from what I understand, all they do is they're charged batteries that you can then charge other things.
Kind of like for a quick boost or to
you charge your ships,
equipment or ship. Yeah, exactly.
Equipment, ships, and then when they're out of power, they plug in, recharge, and come back out. They don't talk. All they say is that's how they get that nickname. Gonk is going. All they say is gonk, gonk, gonk. However, like you said, in Jedi, you actually hear them screaming, so that's another sound that they can make. I guess screaming. As far as variations go, I believe the only thing they have is just the coloring on the side is slightly different.
And actually, in the
deal.
movie, I think they look bluish, but they're actually more grayish blue. I guess they could have different colors, but this guy was definitely blue.
They made him blue for the toy, and the picture actually looks kind of purplish because the light is hitting it, and the picture also has a lot more electronics in the side, and
the picture on the packaging. It's kind of like a composite. It's like a set picture with a mysterious lighting. It doesn't look like it actually came from any scene.
I can only imagine it might have been something they shot at the Sandcrawler because it has a very purple, hazy kind of shade to it that matches how every action figure has a background color that it stands against?
Yes, this one's fuchsia.
It matches that purplish fuchsia, whatever.
Love that card. I love that card. I love that combination.
Yeah. Up next, we have a slightly different type of figure. And if you think about it, it's the second version of Luke Skywalker. And
That's another hero.
Luke Skywalker in the X-Wing pilot outfit. And sometimes they all refer to it as the X-Wing fighter pilot, whatever. It doesn't matter. What's interesting about this figure is that you have, technically, what you're given is supposed to be a Luke Skywalker character in the pilot outfit, and he is wearing a helmet.
Yeah.
Now, what's funny about this figure, and it always confused me sometimes, and then I realized, no, that's what that is. To me, it always looked like, why did they give Luke black hair? And it's not black hair.
No, that's his goggles.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, come on.
But it's like, oh, it's the visor.
What, are you from a
that's
foreign
supposed
country
to
or something?
Well, I am actually. Come on, give me a break. This is a figure that, a lot of people have explained this in the different publications, that because this is the only, at least at this point in the movie, or at least the toy sales, that you had an actual pilot, you would use it, and I would use it as a generic pilot.
Build an
because
army.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter what he was driving as long as he looked like a pilot. So you could say, oh, it's Wedge, oh, it's Biggs, it's whoever, who cares? Yeah. It doesn't matter. He comes with a blaster. It's the Han Solo blaster. Ironically, we never see Luke in Star Wars use that blaster.
In Empire, he does have it.
In Empire, he uses the exact blaster, which is, that's kind of cool. That's kind of neat. What's also interesting about this figure is that, like I said before, he comes with the helmet on, but the picture in the card, he has this helmet off and he's holding the helmet under his arm. So it's unusual that they decided to go that way. I guess at this point, they didn't want to mess around with separate helmets and that sort of thing. So maybe that's why. I have recently customized my own helmetless Luke. And what I did is basically I took the X-Wing Luke, I cut off his head, put in a regular, I think I used a Bespin Luke head, which is, you see the blonde hair. Yeah. Pop that in there. And then I took the head with the helmet and kind of dremeled out the face and, all the head part, and left the helmet kind of hollowed so he can stand there holding a helmet under his arm, kind of like he does on the picture on the card. So that was kind of neat. And obviously, again, future Hasbro stuff, they go completely nuts. You have so many variations. You have so many different pilots. And I believe it is not till later, I think during the Jedi line, where we actually start seeing other pilots, for the rebellion, and we can actually start playing with these different characters. But yeah, I think it's pretty faithful in terms of, he has the little vest, he has the chest plate, he has the straps in the legs, and it's a little different, I believe, than the real costume that he was wearing in Hoth when he was using the snowspeeder, but they never released, as far as Kenner goes.
I feel like the Hoth ones were supposed to be a little bit puffier because of the cold.
Yeah, because they're warmer. It's supposed to keep them warmer, and I think he had gloves. Yeah. He wore these gloves, but I could have swore he was also in Star Wars. Wasn't he wearing black gloves in the ship?
I think so.
He might have had gloves, but again, even by the time we get to Empire, they never released a different type of figure, so we are still using the Luke from Star Wars to pilot the other ships anyway. So, what are you going to do?
It was good enough.
Well, finally, the last figure I want to talk about is a figure that technically was released the following year.
He's the most legendary of all.
He's the most legendary for many reasons. There's different variations of it. There's super expensive, rare versions of him. But what also makes this figure very different is that this is the first figure, not exactly like the Blue Snaggletooth that you were able to get uncarded in a different manner. But this figure is the first of the figures that you actually could send in proofs of purchase in order to get it for free.
Yes.
And it was considered to be, I guess, like a preview figure, a look what's coming type of figure. What do you remember from the first time you even saw that extra sticker or in the back of the card that said, send in these 4 proofs of purchase?
Well, like we said, any opportunity to get more figures was magical. This was the second mail away after that motion stand, that action stand.
Yeah, those stands.
So you needed to use your proof of purchases, which were the little circular things on the back of the figure.
Yes.
Send 4 proof of purchases. I don't remember if you used a little bit of money for shipping and handling or something like that, and send it to St. Paul or something like that, and you would get a Boba Fett. Now, the display had a backing that showed him launching his rocket, like was purported that he could do in some other media, being most importantly the holiday special, and it shows him bent over slightly. His helmet is slightly more rounded, which could have been just because it was more of a concept
it was a prototype
at the time. Prototype, exactly. Yeah. But he was going to have a launching rocket that popped out of his back. Now, urban legend or, truth, who can be sure at this point? But around the same time, some other toys had come out based on Battlestar Galactica. And they had a launching component in their ships, which would let you shoot like a laser. It wasn't really screen accurate, but it would let you shoot these little yellow, or it could have been any color.
A spring-loaded device.
And I think on the Cylon they were red, or vice versa. And they would shoot out this little projectile. Well, supposedly it's always some kid who causes everybody else to suffer, but some kid supposedly put it in his mouth, shot it in his throat, got it stuck in his esophagus. For all we know, he died. They had to cut his arm off. Any number of stories that were legendary at the time. But as a result, other toy companies started to rethink things that shot. And like as the old thing from A Christmas Story, you'll shoot your eye out, kid. They took away the spring-loaded action to avoid any possible legal ramifications. Of course, there was the prototype, and it turns out there were approximately 3. Now, again, that could be urban legend or not, but basically a lot of people have brought it down that there were 3 in existence.
Well, they were employee samples.
Yes, and they were unpainted and never released to anybody. A lot of people feel they got it. They might have gotten it. They think they got it. They definitely got it. Probably they didn't, because there were only 3 alleged examples of the launching backpack. So the ones we got had the housing looking like it would have, and you can see the areas where the spring-loaded mechanism would sit, but it was a glued-in red projectile that you could pry out if you were a go-getter, but it didn't have any mechanism whatsoever to allow you. So customizers down the line have either been really smart and have found a way to gouge it out and make it a bit of a launching type, or eventually they did a homage to it through Hasbro, where you could order a carded example that did have the spring-loaded version or the original-looking version. You could pop in the old style or pop in a newer, larger projectile that was less likely to get caught in a kid's esophagus because it actually was a couple inches longer. But I can remember distinctly, I do remember this, opening my mailbox, and there was Boba Fett. And like I said, I think it was Young America, Minnesota, or St. Paul, or something like that. So you get it in this white shipping box, and they turned out to be legendary too. I still have the white shipping box and the bag inside it. I did open my baggie that it came in, but it came with that, and it came with one of those little catalogs that showed what toys were coming, and
the little letter.
Yeah, and then, sorry, Boba Fett doesn't shoot anymore or whatever it does.
Right, explaining to you that the fact that it looks a little different than what you had ordered, but yada, yada, yada.
If you're unhappy with that, you can send it back. Like, what idiot would send it back? Oh, it doesn't shoot. I'm annoyed. Wrap it up, send it back. We want our 4 proofs of purchase back. But this was an almost perfect figure. He's not quite accurate, but we didn't know what accurate was because he was an upcoming figure. We had seen him in the holiday special, and he was an upcoming figure who was important to the Empire Strikes Back. I don't even know if it said Empire Strikes Back yet at the time. It might have said the Star Wars 2 or Star Wars sequel.
Well, by the time it was released in a Star Wars official card, in the bottom it said a new character in Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. So they already had a title at least at that point.
Yeah, and I'm sure. I mean, we know so much about Boba Fett now and how he was in his white outfit and how they tested it. And he was in a parade in, I guess, what was it, San Jose or one of those types of areas.
Something like that. And the holiday special, he was in a cartoon.
He wasn't as mysterious, but to us, because it's not like today with the internet and some kid sees it and it's around the world in 15 seconds. So he was almost perfect, this figure. And everybody, once you got him, wanted to be Boba Fett if you ever played with your toys.
Right. Now, Boba Fett came, once again, with a Stormtrooper blaster. They didn't give him his accurate blaster that he ends up using, I guess, in Empire.
Yeah, I guess he has just the generic blaster, so that's okay.
The only major variations that I'm aware of, and again, it depends on which one you're buying. If you're buying the Tri-Logo, the Jedi one,
some of his
imported from Canada.
Painted and stuff?
Well, the chest plate, the green chest plate has different shades of green, and the face, the T-bar, like that T-shaped thing in his face and his helmet?
Yeah, it's just poking out
Some
a
of them are
bit.
thinner, some of them are thicker, that sort of thing. So it's no major, catastrophic type of variations, but it is because the fact that this particular figure, number one, is very popular. It has that rocket firing feature that is very controversial of whether or not you got your hands on one or another, because it's a cool character and all that stuff. It is one of these hard to find, and people pay serious money for the different variations of this thing. The only other thing I would say is that one variation of this figure that I have, that I purchased, again, this is one of these overseas purchases. I don't know if it was from China or from somewhere in the Far East or something. I bought and they sell two different types. Again, these are completely unofficial custom things. What they do is they cast a body of Boba Fett in either a very bluish kind of color or a very grayish kind of color. And they will actually put the mechanism in the back for the rocket firing feature. They don't paint the figures. The figures end up blue or gray.
This is a repro of the employee sample.
Kind of right. It's an unpainted repro. And they do sell these.
Or you can take the one that they sold through the Hasbro special release and just paint that.
Right. Well, the Hasbro special release is almost exactly the type of thing that you want.
But why would you want this, knowing that there's only three real ones, and the likelihood of anybody believing you were fortunate enough of all the people on the earth to have it in your house? That's probably cost less. The house probably costs less than what it would really cost to buy it.
Well, again, it goes back to the purpose of your collecting.
All right.
If you are collecting to convince somebody that it's real, then you're full of crap. If you are collecting because you like it and you know you're never going to own the real one and you want to just stare at it, there it is.
All right. That's
also,
fair.
I believe at the time, these reproductions that I was talking about, the unpainted ones, came, I think, before Hasbro decided to put that special anniversary one with the actual rocket firing feature. But like I said before, I have seen people who will buy that special one and have them painted too. And also, there are certain people that are manufacturing the prototype looking one. The one with the helmet looks a little different, looks like almost like a Cylon.
That one I'd like to see. I wouldn't mind having that one.
And the paint scheme is different. There's yellows, there's oranges.
That didn't even look like I was going to say it looked closer like the Holiday Special. The Holiday Special one had a look all of its own that only kind of came out during the Macquarie series.
Yeah, different colors. But if you also want to get a good picture of what the prototype looks like, if anybody bought the original carrying case, those 12, the one with the 2 trays for Star Wars, in between the trays, you would have a picture, a card with all the figures.
And he was like a dummy figure standing there, which was completely
the Boba
different
Fett,
looking.
they used the prototype as the sample. They didn't have one at the time.
See, in that case, then now I would want one because you do see it there. So now, well, I guess I can see why somebody would want to grab that because he is
one of those,
he is represented clearly someplace. It's not just like some casual.
Yeah, it's not a card back.
Yeah.
It's in an actual piece of paper inside.
All right,
but it's one of those holy grail things that you kind of chase around. Again, if you're super wealthy, you can find yourself the actual prototype and spend probably thousands of dollars. And if you only want to spend a couple bucks, I'm sure there's somebody who's manufacturing them because I've seen pictures out there. They're reproductions, but at least you got something close to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this brings us to the end of our 2021 backs, and this also basically wraps up not only Star Wars, but it kind of tipped into a little bit of previewing Empire.
And that ended a really innocent time because by the time Empire came out, we were all a little bit older and you have different expectations and more about when things are coming and there's better advertising and commercials and things like that. So it was really a time during the Star Wars figure line, those 2021 backs, where you could almost walk into a store and be shocked to find new figures, where almost after that, it wasn't as much of a mystery when things were coming or what was coming, or previews were easier to be had. So it really was a time when you could be a kid and have a great time finding your figures.
Yeah, and this was also a time where I remember, from what I remember, and I'm sure you remember even more of it, where because you're so early in the line in terms of Star Wars, they would have entire display sections with cardboard display areas, building all around the figure. Like they would hang the figures, they would put them in little slots and stuff like that. And as the movies came, Empire and Jedi, they kind of started getting away from it because they didn't need anymore to have to tell people, look at me, buy this toy. People already knew the toy, so they didn't put that much, effort into it. They were basically printing their own money, as usual. So I want to thank James again for joining me for this one, and you guys for listening. And next time we will be hitting hard
the Empire Strikes Back figures.
Right, the first wave, because again, remember, all these things come in waves. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you here next time at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Kenner's Star Wars collection comes a Stormtrooper, the Sand People, and all 20 action figures, including new Hammerhead, Snaggletooth, and more, each sold separately. And now, Boba Fett, Star Wars villain with his laser rifle. Boba Fett is not yet available in stores, but you can get him free with 4 proofs of purchase from any Star Wars action figures. Details on specially marked packs at participating stores. Offer ends May 31st. Star Wars action figures sold separately from Kenner.
Oh dear. Shoo shoo, ghastly beast. Gonk, 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 gonk.
Princess Leia. Oh boy.